Let me have one question more from this part as well, that if there's no financial support of Arab world with these radical groups, so do you accept that the leadership is moderate and operated by the Arabs? For example, when I called one of the terroristic group like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS, and something like this, the leadership is all Arab. Do you accept this one? And they're moderate.
I'm not sure I understand your question, but all radical movements have a source of finance. You know, if you look at Boko Haram in Nigeria, they have sources of finance, they have military equipment, they have military ammunitions, they have logistical support. So one should ask, where does this come from? I don't think we can make a categorical statement as a one source. There must be many sources. And I think the most important source we should identify is who benefits from such extreme groups. Who benefit from a group that want to dismantle Nigeria?
Who benefit?
To weaken Nigeria. I think if we can answer that question, we can also answer the other question, who is supporting, financing, equipping these groups.
Okay, let me have another question. So there's an objection of Islamic community, especially Afghan peoples, have an objection that the Islamic community ignore all our problems, all our threats that exist in our country. What is your response for this ignore and for this question?
Well, I don't think it's fair. If we take the Organization of Islamic Cooperation as an example, it has always stood side by side with the Afghani people. It has always tried to contribute to the building and reconstruction of Afghanistan. You can see this in the activities that the Islamic Development Bank has been involved in, the projects it has helped accomplish. You can see this in the special fund that was established specifically to assist Afghanistan, and all the projects they in turn have been able to achieve. You can see this in the political support. You can see this in the bilateral relations. So I don't think it's a fair statement to say that Muslims did not stand side by side with Afghani people. Was that enough? Maybe not. And that's why we should concentrate on how we can learn from the past to build up a better future. And that's one reason why we are here, is to listen to the Afghani leadership as to what it is that they expect the OIC to do in standing side by side with the unity government, with the future of Afghanistan, with a formula that will bring everybody into the political process.
Okay, why I have the previous question? Because the people of Afghanistan, once again, think that Islamic community has a kind of sympathy with the Taliban. So this group who killed the innocent people, was it true that the Islamic community have a kind of sympathy with the Taliban in Afghanistan?
You know, these are all assumptions, and let me use a very creative expression that I heard President Ashraf Ghani use, the tyranny of assumptions. Sometimes we make assumptions and then build conclusions on those assumptions. You know, Taliban ruled Afghanistan, which is a historic fact. And as the government of Pakistan, countries had to deal with them. Taliban was Afghanistan at one point in time. So, you know, to have a relationship, diplomatic or otherwise, it's in the nature of things if a country changes its system. But to say that the Muslim world supports some of the ideas, interpretations, understandings that our brothers in Taliban have exercised during their rule and afterwards is actually not true. You know, if you read the literature, if you look at political stance, if you see the action taken, everybody had rejected that narrow, literate interpretation of Islam that Taliban has advocated. But again, I must be careful here, and we all must be careful. Taliban is not just one solid rock. There are different shades and interpretations within that movement. I think the important point now is to bring in all factions of the Afghani society into the table, to make them feel it is to their advantage to be part of the political process, that to be outside of the political process is self-defeating, that for them to make an impact is to become partners. This is how we should look at things now. And this is, I think, a challenge peace and security need to bring in all the factions, especially those who are inclined to do so, those who understand and those who are moderate. We should not ignore, I think, any faction. We should bring in people, provided they all believe in peace, security, stability, and the political process. They all believe in dialogue, in persuasion, in negotiation. And they put their guns away, because if we are going to build an Afghanistan that is strong and stable, if we're going to build an Islamic world that is strong and stable, we should not listen to extreme voices, to literate interpretation, to calls for violence. This is our challenge now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Secretary General, so what is the OIC definition from the Taliban in Afghanistan who are fighting against civilian? Is there a free fighter, terroristic group, or a killer of human? What's your definition?
Our definition is the Afghani government's definition. Whatever the unity government identify, we are in support of. If the unity government identifies them as terrorists, then they must be terrorists. If they identify them as a political force that must be brought in, then we identify them as a political force. If Taliban is part of the reality of Afghanistan, Gibran, we must recognize that reality and decide how to deal with it. What we call them is not the issue. The issue is how we can bring them into the political process, how we can convince all of them that the only future for Afghanistan is when peace and security and stability are achieved. That to build an Afghanistan there is no other alternative but a political process. That the Afghani people are sick and tired of violence, of internal conflicts, of civil war. I think there is a whole generation of Afghans now, young and middle-aged and even young, who don't want any part of that. They want to start producing, they want to start living, they want to start creating, they want to be part of the world at large. They want to keep their Muslim identity, but they don't believe in radicalism, they don't believe in extremism, they don't believe in literate interpretation. I think this is what we should be aiming at and working for and addressing at the present.
Okay. You have a good example that your OIC definition is based on definition that United Government of Afghanistan maybe have about this group, which we named Taliban. So, in the previous, when you go, we have Taliban, if you support the Mujahideen group in Afghanistan. So, how you can accept the Taliban as well as a government, although that we support the Mujahideen group, and the Mujahideen group called these groups extremist and radical group, and they resist against them. So now, how you can accept the definition of government in Afghanistan?
Which government are you referring to? The unity government that we have now?
Yes.
Or previous Mujahideen governments?
Let me clear my question once again.
Yes.
I mentioned that in Jihad period in Afghanistan, you support the Mujahideen. I mean the Arab words.
We all supported them.
You also. But you accept the government of Taliban as well, as a government.
They ruled Afghanistan.
But now...
You were one of the citizens under Taliban.
So you accept that one.
Well, it was the reality.
But now you accept as a radical group as well.
Arabs have recognized Saddam Hussein. He was a dictator, but he was the government of Iraq. So you have to accept reality, and countries have to deal with countries. So if Taliban ruled, it was not acceptance of their principles or their ideas, it was the necessity to deal with Afghanistan.
Just the Arab world were
The entire world.
No, but the European country and American don't accept the Taliban group as a government.
Well, but they have dealt with them. I think it's better to do things in the sunlight rather than in the middle of the night. But Taliban was a passing stage. We're talking about Afghanistan today, not about Afghanistan under Taliban, not Afghanistan during the Mujahideen era. We're talking about Afghanistan of the national unity, of this moment of hope, of this generation that wants peace and stability. We should be talking about how the OIC can help in that process.
Okay, let's come to the new Afghanistan unity government. One of the issues which is a big problem in Afghanistan is the army groups like Taliban, and also all civilians in Afghanistan and all people in Afghanistan need for peace and need for peace negotiation. What role can the OIC play to facilitating this negotiation among the Afghan and the armies?
Well, we can only be useful as an organization within an Afghani-owned and Afghani-led process. We can only be a supportive force for an Afghani process, led and owned by the Afghani people and the Afghani government. So in that context, I think the OIC has comparative advantages. The OIC has no agenda of its own, has no political agenda. We're not a country with a political agenda. We're not here to achieve aims of ourselves. Our only agenda is the security, stability, and a peaceful Afghanistan. Another advantage I think the OIC carries is a moral advantage. We are an Islamic organization, though political and intergovernmental, but it bases itself, identifies itself as an Islamic organization. I think that moral edge makes it easier for all factions to accept the voice, the role of OIC. So these are advantages, no political agenda of our own, a moral edge, and a determination to be part of the process of peace building and reconstruction of Afghanistan. And our conviction that there is a real process now under the new government, under the national unity government. OIC can be, I think, a significant contributor to this Afghani-led, Afghani-owned peace process.
Okay.